"Are you lost too, sir?" the little girl asked the lonely Duke at the railway station. What he did next? "Hey, quick question, how are you feeling right now? Thank you so much for being here. It really means the world to me. I'm working toward 1,000 subscribers, and if this story is already pulling at your heart, please hit that subscribe button for Duke's Royal Library. Smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. It helps more than you know." "Alright, thank you. Now let's get back to the story." "Are you lost too, sir?" the little girl asked the Duke, her gloved hand tugging gently at his sleeve. The Victorian railway station pulsed with the urgent rhythm of Christmas Eve. It was December 24th, and every platform overflowed with travellers desperate to reach hearth and home before the holiday. The station clock chimed every quarter hour, its deep voice barely rising above the crowd. People pressed past one another, clutching parcels wrapped in brown paper, juggling carpet bags, checking pocket watches. Steam hissed from locomotives, porters shouted destinations, and somewhere a caroller's voice rose and fell. His Grace, Duke Alaric Ashbourne, sat motionless amid the chaos. He occupied a wooden bench near a tall arched window tucked in a quieter alcove of platform 3, removed from the press of the central concourse. Outside, fog pressed against the glass, and snowflakes spiraled down through gaslight, settling on iron rails that stretched into darkness. A departure board nearby displayed a single word in chalk: delayed. Alaric didn't react. His black greatcoat lay draped across the back of the bench. A leather travelling case rested beside his polished boots, and next to it, incongruously, sat a small, worn velvet rabbit. The rabbit didn't match the man. Alaric was the image of control. Tailored waistcoat, silver watch chain, sleek dark hair swept back. But the rabbit was clearly old. Its stitching had come loose along one ear, and one of its button eyes hung slightly askew. He held it carefully, not like a nobleman clinging to a meaningless object, but like a father remembering a daughter. His expression remained unreadable, but his eyes, tired, shadowed, distant, told a different story. They weren't fixed on anything in particular, not the departure board, not the passengers, just somewhere else. Perhaps 3 years ago, perhaps further. Suddenly, a tug on his sleeve. Alaric blinked, startled. He turned. Standing before him was a little girl, no older than 5. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Her soft brown curls peeked out from under a burgundy knit hat, shaped like a cat, complete with tiny ears. She clutched a small worn satchel to her chest, its clasp slightly open, revealing the edge of a picture book inside. She tilted her head and asked earnestly, "Are you lost too, sir? I can help you find your mama." Alaric froze. Of all the words, of all the people, this small voice, so innocent, so certain, sliced clean through his carefully constructed walls. He opened his mouth to say, "I am not lost," but the words never came. He looked into her eyes, wide, round, filled with light. There was no fear in them, just kindness, something brave, and something he hadn't seen in a long time: belief. So instead, he asked softly, "Are you lost?" The little girl nodded, but her smile didn't falter. "Mama was here, but then I saw the sweet shop." She pointed toward a corner stall glowing with jars of peppermint sticks and sugared violets, and when I turned back, she was gone. "But it's all right, I'm looking for her. Would you like to come?" Alaric hesitated. Everything logical told him this was someone else's child. Someone was probably already searching. He should alert the station master, summon a constable, and follow protocol. But he didn't move. This girl, this tiny stranger, had reached into his silence and pulled something to the surface, something he thought he had buried for good. He stood slowly, towering over her, but she didn't step back. She simply extended her mitten-covered hand. He looked at her hand, then at the rabbit on the bench, then back at her, and he nodded. "Let's find her together." She grinned as if she had just won a prize. "Splendid." She slipped her hand into his, completely trusting, and began leading him away from the window. They walked past ticket counters, tea rooms, and shop fronts selling travel blankets and tin soldiers. He said nothing, just followed her steady pace, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. She chattered as they moved about candy canes and how her mama always sang songs when she was frightened. Alaric listened, really listened, for the first time in a long while. A few passers-by glanced at them as they moved through the station. Some smiled. Some did a double take, a tall gentleman in a black coat walking hand in hand with a little girl in a cat hat. To the world, they looked like father and daughter. But to Alaric, it was something else entirely. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about estates or obligations. He wasn't sitting in grief. He wasn't hiding from Christmas. He was walking, moving forward, and with each step, the echo of a child's voice from moments before repeated softly in his mind. "Are you lost too, sir?" Perhaps he was, but now perhaps not so much. The station stretched endlessly before them, glowing beneath a flickering gaslight. Alaric walked beside the girl, her small hand wrapped tightly around his gloved fingers. Despite the crowd pressing around them, she walked with purpose, head held high. What happens next will change everything. They circled through the main concourse, past clusters of travelers huddled near coal braziers for warmth. Maisie led with confidence, her small boots clicking against marble floors still wet from tracked-in snow. She peered into every tea room, every waiting area, scanning faces with the determination of someone twice her age. "Let's check the sweet shop first," Maisie suggested, tugging his arm. "That's where I saw the candied ginger. Mama doesn't approve of too much sugar, but she lets me have the lemon drops. They taste like sunshine." They passed through a row of shop fronts, each decorated with holly and paper snowflakes, filled with last-minute travelers seeking gifts or distraction. Alaric followed Maisie's lead, watching the way she moved from window to window, examining every woman in a dark cloak. "She has golden hair like wheat in summer," Maisie explained, "and she wears spectacles when she writes. She's writing a story about a tortoise who learns to dance." Alaric raised an eyebrow. "A tortoise who dances?" Maisie nodded proudly. "With a top hat. Mama says anything's possible in stories." He almost smiled, not in mockery. It caught him off guard, that quiet lift in his chest. "And every night she sings to me," Maisie added, swinging her little satchel. "Even when she's tired, especially when she's tired." They circled through the first-class waiting room, then peered into the ladies' retiring area. No sign of Clara. Alaric knelt beside Maisie, adjusting his coat. Still no fortune. She looked around, lips pursed in thought. "Perhaps she's looking for me too, and we're just missing each other." "Perhaps," he said quietly. A passing porter paused, frowning slightly at the pair. "Beg pardon, Your Grace, is that your daughter?" Alaric hesitated. It would have been easy to say no, but then Maisie looked up at him, eyes wide with trust. "Yes," he said quietly, "we're trying to find her mother." The porter gave a respectful nod. "Check with the station master's office if you haven't already. They might have received a report." "We will," Alaric replied. As they continued walking, Maisie hummed under her breath. He recognized the melody, Silent Night. Her version was off-key, but sweet, just as a child should be. "You're not frightened?" he asked suddenly. Maisie shook her head. "Not really. Mama always says if you're lost, stay kind. Magic will find you." Alaric looked down at her. "Magic?" "Yes," she said, grinning. "Christmas magic. I know we'll find her. I believe in it." There was a pause. Then, as if the words came from some forgotten part of him, Alaric replied, "Perhaps I do as well." And for the first time in years, he almost meant it. The station master's office was a blur of movement and quiet urgency. Clara stood near the mahogany desk, her fingers clenched around the strap of her worn leather bag. Her blonde hair had come loose from its pins after running through the station, and her cheeks were flushed not from cold, but from fear she was desperately trying to hide. Her voice was steady when she spoke to the station master, but her eyes gave her away. "She's 5. Brown curls. Red coat. Small satchel with a picture book. Her name is Maisie." The station master nodded calmly. "We've sent word to all platform guards, madam. Sit tight. These matters usually resolve quickly. Children are braver than we credit them." Clara tried to nod, tried to believe it, but the ache in her chest only deepened. Across the station, Alaric and Maisie were approaching the central corridor again, when a porter's voice called out from a nearby pillar. "Miss with the cat hat, is your name Maisie?" Maisie's eyes lit up. She turned to Alaric. "See? I told you the magic would work." They followed the porter past several platforms, then down a short hallway leading to the station master's office. The moment Maisie turned the corner, her eyes widened. "Mama." Clara looked up just in time to see her daughter running toward her. She dropped to her knees, arms open wide, catching the flying bundle of red coat and brown curls. "Oh, darling," Clara breathed, holding Maisie so tightly it was as if she feared the world would try to take her again. "You're safe. You're safe." Maisie buried her face in her mother's shoulder. "I found you," I told you I would. Clara laughed through her tears, rocking her daughter. Then slowly, she looked up toward the man who had brought her back. Alaric stood several feet away, silent, uncertain. He shifted his weight slightly, as if preparing to turn and walk away unnoticed. But Clara stood, still holding Maisie. Her eyes met his. Wait, she said, stepping forward. You brought her back to me. I merely kept her company, Alaric replied. She did all the work. Clara smiled, eyes glistening. Still, thank you. I don't even know your name. He hesitated, then offered a slight bow. Alaric. She nodded. Clara. For a moment, the world around them faded. The noise of the station, the shuffling of passengers, even the low hiss of steam. There were just the three of them, a little girl safe in her mother's arms, a man who had not smiled in years, and a woman who had held on through hope alone. As Clara stepped back, she noticed something in Maisie's hands. Nestled between her fingers was the worn velvet rabbit. Clara's brows lifted. Where did you get that, sweetheart? Maisie turned the rabbit gently. It was on his bench. He said nothing about it, but it looked lonely. Clara looked back at Alaric. He paused, then offered the faintest smile. It belonged to someone important. Clara didn't ask more. She didn't need to, and somehow, in that quiet understanding, something unspoken passed between them. The storm outside had deepened, grounding more trains. The station buzzed with frustration as people rushed for updates, stood in endless queues, or sprawled across benches trying to find comfort. Overhead, another announcement echoed through the vaulted ceiling. The 7 o'clock service to Oxford has been postponed. Next update in 2 hours. Clara glanced up at the departure board, her hand resting gently on Maisie's back. Her daughter had fallen silent in her arms, warm now, safe, but utterly exhausted. She looked around. Most tea rooms were packed. A few benches were still open, but the thought of spending hours sitting on cold wood again made her wince. Beside her, Alaric checked his pocket watch. Then, as if making a quiet decision, he turned to her. There's a private dining room upstairs. Quiet, warm, proper food. Would you join me? Clara blinked. You don't have to. I know, he said gently. But I'd like to. You both look as though you could use respite. Clara hesitated only a moment longer, then nodded. I'd like that, thank you. The dining room wasn't grand, just a tucked-away parlor above the main concourse, but it was quiet, with soft lamplight and corner tables where the chaos of the station faded to a distant murmur. A steward showed them to a table near the frosted window. Alaric helped Clara settle Maisie onto the cushioned seat, folding her coat to use as a makeshift pillow. The little girl curled up instantly, her breathing soft and even. They ordered simple fare beef tea, bread with butter, hot chocolate, and for a while they ate in comfortable silence, interrupted only by the clinking of spoons and the occasional announcement echoing from below. Clara watched Alaric as he stirred his tea. For all his polished appearance, tailored waistcoat, sleek watch chain, there was something quiet and steady about him, something unexpectedly kind. She cleared her throat. I truly appreciate this. We were meant to have a brief layover. I didn't plan for delays. Where are you headed? He asked. Oxford, she said. New city. New beginning. I've a friend who offered us lodging while I seek work. I write children's books at night, but mostly I manage a lending library. It's been a stretch. Alaric nodded. That's brave. Clara smiled faintly. Some days it feels brave. Most days it just feels like surviving. The steward returned quietly with an extra cup and a fresh pot of chocolate. Then, to Clara's surprise, he laid a small wool blanket over Maisie's sleeping form. I didn't order that, Clara said, confused. The steward smiled and glanced toward Alaric. His grace did. Said the little one might catch cold. Clara looked at him. You didn't have to. He shrugged. It looked as though she needed it. Clara stared at him for a moment, heart unexpectedly tight. Most people didn't notice. You're doing well, he said quietly. I hope someone's told you that lately. Clara froze. Of all the things she expected to hear from a stranger, that was not one of them. Not something so gentle. So needed. She swallowed. Not recently. Then let me be the first. For the first time, Clara didn't feel like someone was being pitied. She felt seen, understood. She glanced at Maisie, peacefully asleep under the soft blanket. Then she looked back at Alaric. Thank you. He nodded once, his expression unreadable but softer than before. And just like that, In the middle of a crowded railway station with delays and strangers all around, something rare unfolded. Not a rescue, not romance, just connection. Simple, unexpected, and real. The snowstorm had stretched through the night, grounding trains and draining spirits. By morning, the station's energy had dulled into a quieter hum. Passengers were exhausted, children fussy, announcements repetitive. To ease crowding, railway staff had begun ushering travelers into designated waiting areas based on ticket class. "Your Grace," said an attendant, spotting Alaric. "We can move you and your companions to the first-class lounge now." Alaric gave a quick nod, then turned to Clara and Maisie, who stood nearby watching as people shuffled past. Clara hesitated. "You needn't include us." But Maisie tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide. "Can we go, Mama?" His Grace said there's hot chocolate. Alaric gave her a small smile. "With cinnamon?" I checked. Clara looked between them. She didn't like feeling dependent on others. But this wasn't just about her. And for once, a part of her wanted to say yes. She nodded. All right. The first-class lounge was a different world. Quiet, warm, with soft lighting, velvet chairs, and a refreshment table that made Maisie's eyes light up. Alaric handled entry with the attendant, while Clara helped Maisie with her coat. They settled into a corner by tall windows where snow still fell in lazy spirals beyond the glass. Alaric opened a leather portfolio, reviewing correspondence while sipping black tea. Clara leaned back in the plush chair, watching Maisie explore the small play corner nearby. A moment later, Maisie returned holding a wooden chess set in both hands. She plopped it onto the table between them. "We're playing," she announced. "Loser has to tell one real secret." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Oh dear. Be careful. She always wins." Alaric glanced from Clara to Maisie, then set his portfolio aside. "I accept the challenge." Maisie's tongue poked from the corner of her mouth as she concentrated. Alaric played well, but she played better. She won the first round. "Right then, Your Grace," she grinned. "Time to confess." Alaric chuckled, rare and warm. "Very well. When I was your age, I used to hide biscuits under my bed, many of them, until my mother discovered an entire colony of mice having a feast." Clara burst out laughing, covering her mouth. Maisie giggled uncontrollably. The second game began. Clara joined. Maisie won again. Clara groaned playfully. "Oh no." She glanced at Alaric, then back at Maisie. "My turn, I suppose?" She paused, then quietly. "I used to be afraid of trains," Maisie gasped. "But we travel all the time." Clara smiled. "I had to learn. Because being afraid and being stuck, they feel rather the same." Her voice lingered in the air longer than expected. Alaric watched her closely. The way she said it wasn't dramatic. It was honest, steady, and somehow it reached into the quiet part of him that had felt stuck for far too long. The next round never finished. Maisie began to blink slower and slower, her small body curled in the corner of the sofa. Clara took off her shawl and draped it over her daughter, gently brushing curls from her forehead. Alaric remained still, observing them with a kind of reverence he could not name. Minutes passed. Maisie stirred, eyes half-lidded, and reached into her little satchel. She pulled out a crumbled homemade biscuit wrapped in cloth. She pressed it into Alaric's palm. "I saved it for you," she mumbled. "Mama says good things should be shared." Alaric stared at the broken biscuit, his throat tightening. It was the first gift he had received in 3 years that came with no strings. Not business, not formality. He didn't eat it. He folded the cloth gently, placed the biscuit into a small compartment inside his leather case. A keepsake. Clara noticed, but said nothing. Later, a railway attendant appeared. "Pardon me. Your train may resume in the next 2 to 3 hours." Clara sat up. She looked at Maisie, still dozing, then at Alaric. They were all thinking the same thing. The end of this strange, quiet chapter might be near. Alaric stood and pulled a small calling card from his waistcoat. He wrote something on the back, folded it, and offered it to Clara. "In case you'd like to continue the game." She unfolded it. A private address, and beneath it, the title of the children's book she had mentioned the night before. He remembered. She looked up at him, speechless. No grand gestures, no pressure, just one man reaching out in the most human way. Clara smiled. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen. If this story is touching something inside you, if you feel even the smallest pull, don't scroll past. Subscribe, like, follow. Stories like this only reach hearts when you help them travel, be part of something that matters. The storm had finally eased. By morning, the station was quieter, not because it was less crowded, but because something in the air had shifted. Hope, perhaps. Movement. A chance to go somewhere that might feel like home. Alaric stood near the same tall windows in the first-class lounge, tea in hand. The snow had stopped falling. Trains were being cleared to depart. One by one, announcements echoed through the hall. The 9 o'clock service to Oxford, now boarding at platform 7. Clara froze. That was theirs. She quickly glanced at the tickets in her bag, then looked at Maisie, still curled under her shawl, half asleep but stirring. Alaric looked over at them, reading the change in Clara's eyes before she said anything. "They've called us," she said softly. "Looks like we're going first." Maisie stretched, blinking against the morning light. "Are we leaving now?" Clara nodded. She stood and helped her daughter into her coat. Her movements were calm, but there was something hesitant in them, as if each button she fastened was sealing something unfinished. Alaric remained where he was, hands resting at his sides. He didn't try to stop them. He didn't make a grand gesture, but he watched closely. Clara reached for her bag, readying to leave. Then she turned to him. "I'm not skilled at saying the right things," she said. "But thank you for seeing us, for being kind without asking for anything." He shook his head. "You never needed saving, Clara, but it was good to walk beside you for a little while." Maisie looked up at him, her eyes as big and round as ever. "Will you be at the station next Christmas?" she asked seriously. Alaric smiled, but it was the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. "I'll try to be," he said gently. Then he crouched down to her level and extended his hand. "Thank you for letting me play chess, and for the biscuit." Maisie beamed and gave him a hug instead. Just like that, they were gone. The platform at Oxford was crowded. Clara and Maisie found their seats and settled. As the train pulled away from the station, Clara reached into her bag to retrieve Maisie's sketchbook and found something she hadn't packed. A small, worn velvet rabbit. The same one that had sat beside Alaric in silence. Clara stared at it, stunned. Maisie noticed and gasped. "He gave it back to us." Clara said nothing for a long moment. She turned the rabbit over slowly, as if it might whisper something if she held it gently enough. There was no note, no card, just the rabbit. But somehow it said everything. Back in London, the city was as loud and fast as ever. Alaric entered his townhouse, brushed snow from his coat, and paused in the doorway. The room was pristine, modern, perfect, but something about the stillness clung to him differently now. He sat at his desk and looked at the miniature portrait that had always been there, his daughter, smiling wide, frozen in time. He reached into his case and pulled out the cloth-wrapped biscuit, still there, still safe. Then slowly, Alaric opened his writing desk. He took out fresh paper and pen. He began to write. "Dear Clara, I hope this finds you well settled in Oxford. I wanted you to know that your mention of the tortoise who dances stayed with me. I found a copy at a bookseller's this morning. It's lovely. So are you." He stared at the words for a long time. Then, without overthinking it, he sealed the letter and sent it. There were no promises, no expectations, just a beginning, just a choice. It started with a reply, a simple letter from Clara, sent the day after she and Maisie arrived in Oxford. She wrote it at the small writing desk of their modest lodging, with Maisie fast asleep beside her, hugging the velvet rabbit. "Dear Alaric, I hope your return to London went smoothly. Thank you again for the chocolate, the game, the quiet kindness. Maisie says she misses her Christmas friend." Alaric read the message late at night, alone in his study overlooking the Thames. He hesitated over the reply for a long time. He wrote back, "London is, as it always was. The station was better. Tell Maisie I miss her as well. Does she still cheat at chess?" That was all. But it opened a door neither of them quite closed. Over the next few weeks, the letters continued. Sometimes just a few lines a book Maisie liked, a moment Clara found amusing at the library, a pen nib Alaric accidentally shattered during correspondence. But slowly, they became longer, deeper. Stories told only after midnight, when Maisie was asleep and the city outside Alaric's window finally quieted. One evening, Clara wrote, "Maisie asked if you knew Father Christmas personally. She insists anyone who gives chocolate and carries a rabbit must be friends with him." Alaric replied, "I do not know Father Christmas, but I do know a brave little girl who believes in magic more than anyone I've ever met." Then one night, Clara's letter came with an attachment, a manuscript wrapped in brown paper. "This is something I've been working on, my newest story. I almost burned it, but then I thought perhaps you might want to read it. No pressure." The manuscript was titled "The Girl Who Got Lost But Found Everything." Alaric opened it, intending to skim. He didn't stop reading until the last line. It was about a girl at a railway station, a tall stranger, a rabbit, a biscuit, and how sometimes home isn't a place, it's a hand you reach for when you're frightened. There were parts that made him laugh, others that made his throat tighten. The girl in the story was Maisie, but also not. The man was him, but gentler, braver. The mother was Clara, in all her quiet strength. He didn't reply that night. Instead, Alaric sent the manuscript with no explanation to a publisher he trusted. "Read this," he wrote. "Just read it." He didn't tell Clara. For days, the letters between them continued. Business as usual, jokes, stories. Maisie's drawings were sent with titles like His Grace and the Rabbit. Then 2 weeks later, Clara sat at her small desk, checking her post before supper. She saw the envelope first. Heavy paper, official seal. Inside, a letter from a London publishing house. "We would be honored to publish your manuscript." Her hand flew to her mouth. She read it over and over, heart racing. The editor's note was kind, personal, warm. The book had moved them deeply. They wanted it for their spring catalogue. The final paragraph made her freeze. "We especially loved the dedication. The story feels rooted in something real, like kindness found when least expected." She reread the words, then glanced toward the sitting room where Maisie was drawing on the floor. Clara didn't have to guess who had sent it. She opened her writing desk, took out fresh paper, and began to write. "You read it, didn't you? And you sent it without telling me." She paused, then added, "You didn't need to fix anything for me, you know." But then her pen kept moving. "Still, you reminded me that perhaps, just perhaps, it was all right to let someone believe in me before I believed in myself." And with that, she sent it. Across the country, as rain fell quietly over London, Alaric read her reply. He closed the letter and leaned back in his chair, heart a little lighter. He didn't reply right away. Some moments deserved silence, the kind that settles gently, like snowfall, before it becomes something more. The railway station was just as loud, just as crowded, just as full of gaslight and tired travellers as it had been a year ago. But Alaric wasn't the same. He stood near the arrival platform, not in a private lounge, not in formal attire, not hiding. Today he wore a dark wool coat, simple waistcoat, and carried no portfolio, no correspondence. Only a small bouquet of winter violets and a hardcover copy of The Girl Who Got Lost But Found Everything. The book had become a quiet success, but to Alaric it meant far more than sales figures. It was the map of something he hadn't known he was still searching for. He checked the platform clock again. Her train had arrived, and then, through the crowd of passengers, he saw them. Clara, her golden hair tucked beneath a wool bonnet, a worn cloak pulled over her shoulders, and Maisie, now 6, but still with the same round eyes and brave steps, dragging a small carpet bag behind her. Maisie saw him first. She dropped the bag and ran, arms wide. "You found us again." Alaric knelt as she collided into his arms. He held her tightly, pressing his forehead to hers. "No," he said softly. "I came to where I knew you'd be. People who matter shouldn't have to be found twice." Clara arrived seconds later, breath visible in the cold air, her eyes unreadable. She stopped a few feet away, unsure. He stood slowly. "Hello," he said. "Hello," she replied, voice gentle. They looked at each other for a long moment. In Clara's arms was the velvet rabbit, still patched and loved. Alaric noticed and smiled. "How was the journey?" he asked. "Long," she said, returning the smile. "But we're here." "I heard someone received a publishing contract in London," he said, "and someone else offered to help find lodging. Said he knew the city well." "I do," Alaric said. She stepped a little closer. "And someone said he'd be here." I wasn't certain if he meant it. "I meant it." Clara glanced down at the violets, then at the book in his hand. Her book, the one she almost never sent. He took a breath. "This isn't perfect. We still have different lives, much to navigate. But this is real. I'm here. And if you'll have me, I'd like to be part of wherever you're going next." She stared at him, eyes softening. Then she reached out and took the violets. "That's the best timing I've had in years," she whispered. Maisie grabbed both their hands, one on each side. "Can we go now?" "I want chocolate, and perhaps biscuits." Alaric laughed. You're still the captain, aren't you? They stepped through the glass doors of the terminal into the crisp air of London. People brushed past them in all directions. Carriages clattered, bells chimed, snow began to fall. But for a moment, it was just the three of them. Maisie looked up as they walked. Are we still looking for something? Clara glanced at Alaric, her hand still in his. No, darling, she said, voice warm. I think we've been found. And behind them, the railway station faded into the glow of the city. Not an ending, just the right place to begin. Over the months that followed, life unfolded in ways none of them had planned, but all of them had quietly hoped for. Clara's book was published to gentle acclaim. It wasn't a sensation, but it was beloved, read aloud in nurseries, passed between mothers, cherished by those who understood that the best stories aren't about grand adventures but about quiet moments of grace. She began work in a second, then a third. Alaric helped where he could not by taking over, but by believing, by reading her drafts late at night and leaving notes in the margins, by making introductions when she needed them, by watching Maisie when deadlines loomed and Clara needed an uninterrupted afternoon. Maisie grew, not just in height, but in confidence. She started school in London and made friends easily. She still asked big questions and believed in magic, but now she also believed in something more tangible, that people could choose each other, even when the world said it was complicated. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after they'd first met, the three of them returned to the railway station. Not because they were traveling, but because Maisie had asked. I want to see where the magic happened. She'd said simply. So they went. They walked the same corridors, past the same shops, now decorated with fresh holly and ribbons, found the same bench where Alaric had once sat alone, clutching a velvet rabbit and a grief he thought would never lift. Clara stood beside him now, her hand in his. Maisie sat on the bench, legs swinging, the rabbit in her lap. Do you think there are other people here who are lost? She asked. Alaric knelt beside her. Perhaps. Should we help them? Clara smiled. Perhaps we already are. Just by being kind. Maisie considered this, then nodded sagely. That's what Mama always says. Magic isn't loud, it's just noticing. Alaric looked at Clara. She looked back. And in that look was everything they'd found in each other: partnership, patience, a love that hadn't demanded anything, but had given everything. As they prepared to leave, Maisie tugged on Alaric's sleeve one more time. Are you still lost, Your Grace? He smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached his eyes. No, Maisie, not anymore. She grinned. Good, because I found you, and I'm very good at finding things. They walked out into the London evening, where snow was just beginning to fall again. The city glowed with gaslight and warmth, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Clara leaned into Alaric's side. Maisie walked between them, holding both their hands. And for the first time in years, perhaps in their entire lives, all three of them felt exactly where they belonged. Not lost, not searching, just home. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love doesn't have to be loud to be real, that kindness can be the beginning of everything, and that sometimes the people we're meant to find are the ones who see us when we're not even looking, then don't just watch and leave. Subscribe, like, follow, share this with someone who needs to remember that magic still exists in the smallest, quietest moments. Every day, we bring you stories that don't just entertain, they stay. Tales of connection, hope, grace, and love that arrives without force but changes everything. This is soul-stirring stories, and we're only just beginning. Hit that notification bell, because we always have stories for you. Don't miss it. And to everyone who stayed until the end, thank you, truly, for letting us walk beside you for a little while, for believing that stories like this still matter. Remember, the people we're meant to find always find their way back. Until next time, take care of yourself. Good night.